Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Wisconsin, also known as the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We don't have time tonight, but I love to tell that story of how the Upper Peninsula of Wisconsin was stolen from us. But a different story, or tag me down later to tell that story. She was surrounded by books, bookshelves on both sides of a living room window opening onto our front yard, bookshelves in each of the kids' bedrooms, Saturday morning walks to the Andrew Carnegie Library. As an early teen, she tried to check out the book The Bad Seed when the librarian said it was an adult book. Her mother went to the library to inform the staff that Bonnie could check out any book that she chose to read. Her mom was a longtime member of the Drawing Room Club in Iron Mountain, which had a similar format to that of the Wednesday Club, which is the topic of this evening. Her mom became a librarian for the West Bend, Wisconsin Public Schools. A sister Jan was the director of library services for a New York State school district. Another sister and a brother were professors in universities in French and English literature. Our Bonnie attended Lawrence College, class of 62. That's almost 60 years ago.
Right.
Where did that, well, and I graduated high school 55 years ago last night, and don't you just shake your head? You say, where did those years just go? Well, they did. Class of 62. She was elected, her major, of course, was English. She was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. She met a classmate, Bob Buchanan, married him. They raised 3 children and enjoy 5 grandchildren. Now, Bonnie joined the Wednesday Club in the spring of 1968, having settled in Appleton in the fall of 1967, 55 years ago. The first paper, this is the first paper that you did, was a study of Don Juan by Lord Byron. Her community commitments are almost endless. Member of the Appleton Public Library Board.
These are all past. I'm no longer involved. Past history.
Past history. These are things she has done. Member of the Appleton Public Library Board, which researched and supported the current library building. Member of the Appleton YMCA Board, was its first woman president and chair of the investment committee. She was a member of the first board of the Fox Valley Community Foundation. She researched and organized the structure and duties for the initial grants committee. Board member of Camp Manitowish YMCA in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. Member of First Congregational Church, serving on the Pastoral Search Committee and Garden Committee. She's traveled the world. Her favorite country is Scotland. She and her husband have built 2 homes. They've established and managed 2 large gardens. And she's passionate about that Scottish sport of playing golf, which you still do, I assume. Indeed.
But the weather here has been so bad.
It's been very Scottish-like, hasn't it? Yes. Philanthropic focus on Lawrence. She's endowed scholarships for students from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, endowed a chair in the English department, and established the tree replacement project on the campus. She's now promoting street names to honor the women who were early settlers in Appleton. And she would like to have this new Appleton story that PBS is working on, that we've had some involvement and assistance with. She wants it to include not only the stories of the manufacturers on the Fox River, but also the stories of the women who came to Appleton with them and contributed to the city's civic, educational, and social institutions. And women obviously were critical. If I can tell a personal story, my great-great-grandfather was John Kimberly, co-founder of Kimberly-Clark. And his lovely wife Helen got home ec going in the schools. And they were having trouble up in Niagara plant because they couldn't keep the young men in town so they could employ them at the plant. Well, great-grandma Helen said, well, that's no problem. You just go up there, you introduce home ec in the schools so the girls can learn how to cook, and the way to the man's heart is through his stomach. And of course, initially, the board of the Kimberly-Clark sort of poo-poo, well, what is this lady? Well, they finally took her advice. Smart lady, and it worked. Please, a warm welcome for Bonnie Buchanan, who's going to talk about Wednesdays, women, and words.
As Tom said, how appropriate to meet today and talk about the Wednesday Club because it is Wednesday. And the club met on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, beginning in September and concluding in May and sometimes June. So it is a literary club. That is its designation on all of its books, and it means it's a participatory organization. Club members choose the literary theme for a year's study and receive assignments for papers related to the chosen topic. These are about an hour's length in their reading of them. Discussion of the subject follows the reading, and then members enjoy tea and crumpets served by the host. That has been, when it was started in 1881, and it has continued with that same pattern all these many years. The original club, however, met fortnightly or every other week, and even through the holidays. I never found a meeting that was held on Christmas Day, but it was the day before Christmas. So they were committed to that schedule. Secretaries kept minutes from the beginning, 1881, and and they still do today. The original minutes from 81 to about 91 have been lost. They were there in the archives about a dozen years or so, but they've now been lost. I didn't find them anyhow. The program begins with the program committee selected the specific papers which the members were to write, and all of them supported the theme that the club itself had chosen. And the programs were distributed, as they still are today, at the spring luncheon, which occurs at the end of the season of the club. And if you received your program and it was with, you had the first meeting program in September, it could spoil your summer because you had to do the research for that paper. At the club's beginnings, the women met at 2:30 in the afternoon to listen to the first part of the day's assignment. This was maybe 45 to 60 minutes. Then there was a break for a business meeting, and then a second hour for the second part of the program. Two women could share a program, or one could do the whole, take the program herself. The host would have the option to offer tea and dainty, they always call them dainty refreshments. During my 54 years in the organization, there has been a 1-hour presentation on the assigned topic, followed by discussion among the members, and then a usually short business meeting. At its conclusion, members visit, as always, over tea and sweets. If a member of 100 years ago came to the meeting, she would immediately recognize the pattern of the club that she had formed. Now, how did I come about writing this book, which I have copies for sale over on the table, $24, cash or check. And all of this is in much greater detail in there. In 2006, I was asked to update the club's history, which the last issue had been written for its 100th birthday. Thus, I was asked to do this for the 125th year. I undertook research at the History Museum at the castle, where the club's club's materials are archived, and gave the requested presentation to the club in the fall of 2007. However, I had become attached to the women I studied and knew there was much more to learn of their lives in Appleton. I heard them calling my name. I wanted to restore them to the history of the Fox River Valley, where their settlement efforts in the community contributed to Appleton's character, growth, and success. Why write a book? I must confess that it was not my lifelong dream to write a book, nor was it the plan of the president of the Wednesday Club in her request of me to update this club's history. Recording its history was an established tradition of the club. Secretaries had kept minutes of every 2-week meeting from September to June. Further, at the conclusion of each year, the club celebrated its success with a special gathering to which, in the early years, the members' husbands were invited, and these were also recorded in the minutes. Another indication of the commitment to the club's own history was the printing of a program each year that listed the theme for the year's study and the members' assignments with the date of their delivery. And in every recorded entry in the minutes, the member's presentation was termed her work, signifying her level of commitment to the organization. Thus, my work for you tonight begins with a history lesson. East Central Wisconsin was not unknown to various groups of people, beginning with the indigenous nations who had settled throughout the area. History records the exploration undertaken by Marquette, Joliet, and Alloway, and the area was long a part of the fur trade across the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. However, after the Revolutionary War, the 1783 Paris Peace Treaty extended America's boundary from Pennsylvania to the Mississippi River. That's what was its reward for victory. And they called it the new Northwest Territory of the USA. And it always made me curious why Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance had the name Northwestern. And that's why any agency that was developed before in that period of time used Northwest. As each defined area between Pennsylvania and the Mississippi River met certain requirements, including ownership of the land, it became a state, which Wisconsin did in 1848. It was also amazing to me to realize that this area was also part of the great westward movement of the American citizenry. New England and New York State had become crowded with generations born there and with new settlers from Europe. Among the groups of people moving west were members of the various Protestant churches who were exhorted by their pastors in the East to settle the West with their religious commitments. The Methodist Episcopal Church, which had a strong commitment to education for both boys and girls, had a proven organization for westward expansion, which involved circuits organized by elders in the church and with revival preachers going out into the wilderness. Amos Lawrence, a wealthy investor from Boston, offered land along the Fox River to the ME Church if it would match his $10,000 gift to build an academic academy. And the church managed that feat, which was a tremendous undertaking at that time. The donated land was on the northern bluff of the Fox River in the town named for the donor's wife's family, Appleton. In 1847, a year before the state of Wisconsin was certified, the ME Church built an academy in the area where the current Appleton YMCA stands. And there's no photograph of it, but this is a drawing of it made decades and decades ago. It is hard to imagine what impact that structure had on the incoming pioneers, what it meant in terms of commitment to the development of a real city where families could thrive. I mean, to think that the very first thing that was built was this structure, and it was at the top of the bluff above the river. In the inside cover of my book is a picture of the tracts of land that had already been sold. I mean, investors were just racing to get out to this area and buy land. And then they, of course, would sell it to the manufacturers and to the city officials and to the residents and make their money. The male investors in the land, and they're all listed there along the Fox, had, as I said, had purchased great tracts of property to sell to incoming settlers who would manage the mills on the river and operate the commercial enterprises on College Avenue. So right beneath the bluff where this building was the beginning of the manufacturing area on the river. And then on the other side of the going north was College Avenue, where the commercial area was established. So there were just a few blocks between College Avenue and the bluff, and then the manufacturing on the river. A school was an excellent drawing card for families to join the investors on the western frontier. They built their own homes on the bluff above the river, north to City Park, and east from Oneida Street to the Fox River, where it turns north at the College Avenue Bridge. This is an early picture of College Avenue, and you can see the CA down below is College Avenue. So the buildings were two-story, and with the wares for sale on the ground floor, and often the second floor was for the residence of the owner of that business. Anyhow, then there's the old brown church, which was the Congregational Church, built in 1853. So you can see how quickly they put up buildings and substantial structures, which, like the churches, would make a statement like that would make a difference to the settlers. Then that big ravine is which is often referred to in newspapers and texts is now the Jones Park, but it was a ravine that started way north and came down to the river. And then this street behind here was Market Street, and then there was the Reeve home, and he was a doctor that chose to settle here, and I don't go much into that story. Here today I won't go into any of it, but it is in my book. The female settlers wanted all the amenities they had known on the eastern seaboard. And thus the Wednesday Club, but I forgot this picture. This is the Waverly House, which was built in the early 1860s. I mean, it's a huge structure. It's built on Lawrence Street, right across from the big ravine. And it was used by people who came and wanted to stay for several weeks. It was a very handsome boarding house. And then it was destroyed by fire in the, I think about, what? Oh, in 1897. And right across here was the big ravine, and also the Winslow's home, and also the place where Zoma Steele and her parents and brother and husband and children settled there for several weeks before they decided to build their own home. At any rate, the women wanted what they had known on the eastern seaboard, including a literary study club. Thus, the Wednesday Club was founded as a near copy of the pattern used in a Congregational church in Vermont. Operating from September to May, it met fortnightly every 2 weeks, where women presented their works. There's a handwritten program that is not the next slide, but with its extended literary tour of Rome was particularly influential in my commitment to the study of this study of the club. Then one of the specific sources that I found about the early club was a newspaper dedicated to women's clubs in 1900, published in 1900. And there were dozens of clubs. There was a club for every single interest a woman could have, and well organized. And so in the Laura Reeve, who lived just down the street from this building, wrote the article for the Wednesday Club. And she was a founding member of the club, who stated in the paper that a group of women had created a literary study club in 1881 because they refused to give up the study practices that they had learned in their years of formal education. So all of these women had been to school, and usually quite advanced. It was this deep commitment to the study of literature that intrigued me. Who were these women with such strong literary interests? What were they doing on the new western frontier of the young nation? Where were they born? Who were their parents? What cities did they leave? Why and when did they travel to Appleton? Whom did they marry? Where did they live? What projects did they undertake in the new city on the Fox River? So much research to undertake, so many notes to record, so many pictures to acquire. And I'm not a research-trained person, so I developed a system kind of on the fly. I dedicated one file box per woman with a fill-in-the-blanks checklist that I created and used for each woman, meaning that the front page had her name, place of birth, where educated, church, all the data. So I had several pages like that, exactly the same for each woman, so that I could put them out and see how many had pursued the same, had shared the same past, and where they'd gone to school, where they overlapped, all kinds of data, information like that. Then I had separate files for Appleton and its civic institutions, its churches, anything that caught my fancy, and another file held my bibliography. Based on early research, such as the newspaper and just reading in the minutes, I selected 12 women for deeper study and paired 2 women per chapter. I think there's one case where there were 3 women, based on similarities in their lives. I did enjoy the research. There's a tremendous body of literature out there available, but I did have to set limits. I mean, I could have just gone on researching forever and ever, but I decided I needed to write. My major sources were the History Museum at the Castle, the Appleton Public Library, the First Congregational Archives. The ME kept archives, but they were destroyed in a fire, the Methodist Episcopal Church. And also Tom Sutter's collection of maps. And I had the Wednesday Club minutes and programs from the 1890s forward. I organized and conducted 2 walking tours for the History Museum, which made me feel I could engage an audience on this subject. My ladies, as I termed them, lived in the area around Main Hall above the Fox River. Now, with the U.S. Venture Plan, most of those streets, homes, all homes and churches have disappeared. So I couldn't take you on a tour. Then, continuing with my how I wrote my book, I made contact with a Lawrence historian who reviewed several of my files. And she said, yes, there was a book in my research. And she obtained a grant for a Lawrence student to assist with establishing a filing system in my home. Another student helped with my computer skills. Not this kind of skill, but just using a computer, how to set up the pages. And then my husband, Bob, who is in charge of selling the books, suggested I use the dining room table for the writing process, the room of my own. And if you just think of a dining room, it's filled with flat surfaces. Of course, you can't entertain anybody in your dining room, but it's got lots of flat surfaces. So I could just look around and see what was available or where I was working. A friend suggested a publisher, Sand Beach Press in Sister Bay, Wisconsin. We would meet at the UW Green Bay, halfway between us, where she asked questions and recorded my answers about the work I was researching. Then I would go home and write, which is a very serious discipline and very hard work when deadlines are set. I became attached to my ladies, making discoveries and connections in the women's neighborhood where I live. They were companions. I knew their homes, their walks, their families, their meetings, their churches, their attachment to Lawrence, their Wednesday club studies, Theirs is a tremendous story of settling Appleton in the new western frontier of this nation and being able to do it in my own backyard. Now, for how I organized my book, the first chapters set the stage. In early histories that I read, only the men were mentioned. Occasionally there would be a brief reference to the wife, but all of the men brought their wives and families. So I wanted to know, what did they do here? It was so bad that in one obituary for a gentleman whose wife was in the club, the wife is not even listed in the husband's obituary. I mean, you can see how slanted it was. So that's what motivated me really to give these women an opportunity to state what their contribution was. Do I have favorites? I like them all, but I liked Steele because she came from Vermont to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I liked Jenny Lummis because she was interested in writing, or she had to write for income. So they had a very, very limited budget, and she was always working outside of what she did in the home and in the community. And then I also was interested that they were social activists. They were members of the Temperance Union, a Women's Christian Temperance Union, and also in the suffragette movement. So they cared about the wider country. The churches were very important to them and were built in their neighborhoods. They were in this particular area, there were Protestant churches, the Methodist Episcopal, the Congregational, and the Grace Episcopal Church, all had significant structures here. This map is an early one, and it has Lawrence property Ward 1 was the first. There were 3 villages here first, Lawsburg, I forget what they were, and they incorporated then into wards. So this is Ward 1. And this was Lawrence property, went all the way up to North Street. But there were times when Lawrence was very poor, and they sold the land. They had to buy some of it back later, but so this is Lawrence with the main hall there, 1853. The Academy building was it was in this area right here. It was the first building built, was right in this area, and I think then. And this is early, just have the river situated there without, and you see first ward and then the second ward was down there. Okay, then this shows you how the river, and I'm sure you all know that it moves, it's a northward flowing river, I think 140 some feet between, or miles between, no, whatever, from Winnebago to Green Bay. But this is the big ravine, and then you have, which is Jones Park, and you could see the Waverly House there. I need a pointer, right under college. And then you have the church, the different churches around, and Lawrence with just the main hall built there. And then you have the bluff, all the way around the north side of the river, and then the beginning of the manufacturing and the preparations, the railroads, the bridges, the canals, the dams, all. And then here's a later one when you have Ormsby, which is built in 1889 on the grounds of the university, and also the President's House, that little one up there was built in 1881, the year the club was founded. Tom, here's the Kimberly Clark structure here, and Patent Paper Mills. And you can see how much infrastructure was going around to support the mills. And lots were sold and homes built on them. This is interesting. This to Hiram Jones right here he was a much esteemed professor of Latin and Greek, and he was given that as compensation for, they often didn't have any funds for salaries. Lawrence didn't. And my ladies lived primarily in this area in Ward 1, and then down on Lawrence Street, which went that way. And this is an 1889 map, so you can see it gets closer to what we know today, and the railroads, and still more development south of the river, but the major early development was all on the north side of the river. And this was in 1888, the Congregational Church. It's a red brick with limestone and Lake Superior redstone. I mean, it was a huge, impressive structure, and you can see how deep it goes down on the right side. That's the bluff that goes down to the river. And a long way from the little brown church, which was across the street, probably about where I'm standing now from that church, but right on Lawrence Street. And behind the church was a tenement house built for a period of time where laborers, you can see the outline of the church in back. But they had to have, housing was a major issue, of course, because people were coming to the area so quickly. This is Ormsby Hall, which was the first dorm built on the campus for women. And the reason the men had been living on the 4th floor of Main Hall. That was their dorm. And the overflow, both men and women, were in the homes of in the neighborhood. And there were lots of challenges because hard to keep people inside and going to, obeying times to be in your domicile. There were also fires. One fire was described where the male students rushed in, throwing everyone's stuff out the second-story windows, including a piano. I mean, it was just crazy. But I was in Ormsby my freshman year, and this is the science hall behind it. And this is from Union Street, about a little later. You have main hall on the right side, and then you have the Underwood Observatory, the first Alexander Gym, then the Stevenson Science Hall. I'm a little off. And then Ormsby. And even when I was in Ormsby, there was still a private home to its west that was used at that time for the nurses' headquarters.
Pardon me, what's that dome?
Underwood Observatory.
Oh, this observatory.
Yes. And the funds for that were raised by the faculty member who was the teacher. He went ahead, Underwood is his name. And then the library was built in 1897. Well, right now it's right here is the office building, and then College Avenue. It's right at Market Street. Market Street would come right into the entry to the church, to the library, and yeah, and the woman who established the very first reading room was a Wednesday Club member. And then she did not live to see this structure, but it was very impressive. And this was 1893. So this is from the south side looking across the river up to the bluff. And on the bluff, high on the bluff would be homes of Wednesday Club members. But you can see how advanced the manufacturing was on the river. It was just jam crowded with.
Isn't there a lot right down there in the
Yep.
bottom of the picture?
Yeah, it is a lot. Yeah. I mean, there were dams, locks, canals, trains, everything down on the river. So. Okay, and then this is a picture of the first, the program book. They wrote their own programs in the beginning, but this one was by Minna Winslow, and it was a 2-year literary study of Rome, I think. And you can see what the dates, the historical sketch of Rome, who had that, and all the way through this season of study. And this was 1907, but it's the same kind of organization, how it's put together. And we get programs today too. I think that's it.
A quick question, did they vote numbers in, or?
Yes, it's limited to 25 members because you have it in your home. And so you have to have space to seat them and then serve a little pastry. But 25 members, and that's what they could keep managing, and it's always been that way. In my book, I work to give some sense of each lady's, I think, did I tell you this? Home life, church, career, and community work, what she valued and what lasted, and what her life was like. And I also included several supplements. One is about Lockhurst. Some of you have already asked me about Lockhurst, and it was a group primarily of Wednesday Club members and their families who settled on Lake Winnebago. It was a very popular thing to do nationwide, to go out of the cities and into the countryside. And they wanted to do that in this area too. And I also included some recipes from the Congregational Church recipe book, cookbook of the late 1800s, and they sold cookbooks to support missions. And I also have a comment on the placement of their, where they were buried in Riverside Cemetery. They had that area was developed after the Civil War as people were, citizens of this country were struck with deaths from the Civil War. And so they wanted to have a combined park where they could walk about and visit the graves of the Civil War veterans deceased. And then I created a timeline too, which gives you a visual of the dates of when they arrived in Appleton and what where they lived, activities, what events were taking place in the country.